Now, one question that we're all very likely to ask at some point is, how much weight should I be using? And this video is meant to provide some guidance to help you select the right weights for your workout. Now, more often than not, choosing the right amount of weight boils down to this. You want to use as much weight as possible, but you must stick to all of the parameters set out in your program. So, as heavy as possible, sure, but you have to stick to the tempo, the desired number of repetitions, the rest, and of course, using proper form. So if any of these factors start to break down, well, the weight very well might be too heavy. But if your posture is on point, if you're getting the desired number of repetitions, if the tempo is good and the weight feels challenging, you're probably in the right place. Now, I appreciate that this is a sort of a nebulous description, so let's look at an example. Say our workout calls for 4 sets of 8 to 10 repetitions. Now, one of the reasons I like using that rep range, that is 8 to 10, as opposed to a fixed number like 10, is that it can let us know how close we are with our weight selection. The range here is to allow for some wiggle room as we get tired. So, say we start our set of squats and we begin with our first set and we successfully get 10 repetitions. Good news. Maybe on our second set, we also get 10 repetitions. Maybe on our third set, as the fatigue starts to build, maybe we get stuck at 9. And on the fourth set, maybe we're even more tired, so we get stuck at 8 repetitions. So our results are 10, 10, 9, and 8. This is a great sign that the weight here is pretty much right where we want it. It's clearly not too easy, because if it was too easy, then we wouldn't have gotten stuck with those sets of 9 and 8. But it's not really too heavy either, because we stayed within the desired range, 8 to 10. Now, to be clear, the range here is to allow for some expected fatigue, but it's important to always aim for the top of the rep range. Don't just stop at 8 because you think it counts. And furthermore, your first set should pretty much always be at the very top range. So if you're aiming for 4 sets of 8 to 10 and your first set you only get 8, that's probably too heavy. The range is to allow for a little bit of room as we fatigue, but we should be starting at the top of that rep range. We can also use the results, those sets of 10, 10, 9, and 8, and use that as a guide pole for what we should do for our next session. So this 10, 10, 9, 8 should tell us that the weight for the next time should stay the same, because there's still some room for improvement at that 100 pounds. So maybe in our second session, we get 10, 10, 10, and 9. That's great. One nice thing about using the rep ranges is it allows us to see small incremental improvements from one session to the next. A few more reps from one session to the next one is a really great sign. It means that you're improving. But since we still have some room in that last set still, that is 10, 10, 10, 9, you probably want to stay there once more. Maybe our third go around, you get 10, 10, 10, and 10. First of all, nice work, more improvement. And second, now it might make sense to increase the weight a little bit for next time. So maybe we go to 105 pounds. And then once we add weight, maybe in our first set we get 10 repetitions, in our second, 10, maybe in our third, 9 again, and then in our fourth, 8. So we add weight, we fall a little behind towards the end in those last couple of sets, and we apply the same approach as before. Now, it's generally a good idea to try and keep the weight consistent across the duration of an exercise. Now, there are plenty of exceptions to this rule, of course, like in our last example where maybe you only got to 8 repetitions where the top of the rep range was 10. If that was your first set, then yes, it is a good idea to decrease the weight so your first working sets are at the top of the weight or the rep range. But once you've established that the weight is a good place to start, you're better off sticking with that weight for the duration of the exercise. And here's why. One thing that I've seen plenty of times is, say we're doing our squats and you're using 100 pounds. The first set you get is 10, good. Second set, 10, also good. Third set, 10. So far, so good. And maybe you think to yourself, you know what, I feel pretty good. Maybe I'm going to go up to 105 for this final set. So you add a few pounds for the last one, and maybe you get 8 repetitions. So 3 sets of 10 at 100 pounds, and then 1 set of 8 at 105. Okay, it's not a disaster, of course. But now, what do you do for your next workout? Do you move up to 105 pounds? I mean, maybe? Maybe you would have gotten 10 reps in that last set if you had stayed at 100 pounds, but we don't really know for sure. Or do you stay at 100 pounds? Hard to say because, again, you're not sure if you would have gotten all the way to the top at that rep range. So while it is often tempting to adjust the weight towards the end to kind of reach for a higher number, generally you're better off sticking to the plan, sticking with that same weight, and if you get to the top of the rep range for each of the listed number of sets, after that in the next session, then you adjust the weight. Now, before we wrap up, it is worth mentioning again that there are lots of exceptions to this guideline. I mean, hopefully it will serve you well for as we're kind of getting started, but there are times where reaching for the most challenging weight is not always the right call. A workout might call for you to do sets of 8, but you use a weight for which you could do a set of 12. And not every workout will give you a rep range. Sometimes we want to be more particular and follow a very specific rep scheme, something like 6-6-4-4-2-2 or 7-7-5-5-12 or 3-2-1-3-2-1. But for any rep scheme or loading strategy that's a little out of the ordinary, we'll be sure to give you some guidance on how to approach it whenever it pops up. So we've covered a fair amount in this video, but when it comes to weight selection, remember the basics. Is your form on point? Is the tempo correct? Are you starting at the top of the rep range? Is it challenging? Ask yourself this little checklist each time, and if the answer is yes, well then you're pretty darn close. So by using the rep ranges and a little bit of intuition, you can fine-tune the weight to just the right amount for your program.